Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show we ask the question, what subjects and careers should young Muslims pursue to fulfill their Islamic duties?
Millions of young Muslims in Europe are back at school and university for the upcoming year of studies. In a world where there seems to be thousands of subjects and courses to choose from, it is becoming increasingly difficult to decide on which career to pursue. With Islam placing so much emphasis on earning a lawful income and helping the welfare of humanity, particularly that of Muslims, it is important to know which career can best serve these purposes. This week's Islam and Life asks, what subjects and careers should young Muslims pursue to fulfill their Islamic duties?
That's an important question. If we were to look at the situation in Europe a few years ago, one generation ago, we'll see that the Muslims who came and settled down in Europe were just facing the challenge of trying to get some money with the idea that they will go back or come back home. This was, were people coming from Pakistan, India, Turkey, or northern African countries. And it was a bit different in the United States of America, where the young generation were much more made, the immigrants, by the way, were professionals and coming as medical doctors and computer scientists. Now the situation is completely different in the United States as well as in Europe, where we have the second, third, and fourth generation of Muslims now being much more present within academia, within universities. And it's important to know, are there some priority subjects that they have to choose or careers that they have to choose, knowing that we also have converts and people coming to Islam and they are well educated and they are present. So there are priorities, knowing two things, that in Islam knowledge is essential, but serving and solidarity is also essential when it comes to the society. Changing the society for the better is a duty from an Islamic viewpoint. So what are the priorities, in which way they have to be, this has to be decided? These are questions that are important, and to answer these questions I'm joined by my guest, Islamic lecturer and researcher Amina Inloz. Thank you so much for being with us. You have a two-dimensional presence because you are coming from the United States of America, you live in Europe, you are a Muslim, and you are within academia and research and teaching at the same time. So everything is in you, in fact, and you are the best person to answer this question. If you have to look at the situation in the West today, we have to think, is this important? Because many people are telling us, you don't have to tell people, Muslims are people of other faiths. They do whatever they want. We are thinking about being a community of believers, serving ourselves and serving the community, but serving also humanity. Is this an important question? How would you address this question?
Well, I don't think it's just an important question for Muslims. I think it's an important question for any community or any society. Obviously, every job and every field of study that is useful, of course, every useful field of study is important for a society. People such as janitors or caterers and so forth don't always get the respect they deserve, but every job is important. I mean, I'm slightly hesitant to connect job to education because in some ways they are different things, and yet, as you mentioned, we all know that nowadays most of the young people go to university because they want to prepare for a certain job, not just for the sake of studying. Perhaps it's due to my many dimensions, unfortunately, but I wouldn't necessarily say, in my view, though, that there's one specific career path that I think Muslim youth or youth in general should follow. I think it's important that we are balanced and we have people going into different fields. For example, some people in the sciences or medicine, engineering, and these things which are very much pushed by some of the Muslim community and valued a lot. Other people going into maybe more practical professions. But my personal view, and this may be the added dimension here, is I do think one of the main gaps we have in the Muslim world, and I'm not just talking about the West, but the Muslim world at a large, is people who are what I would call idea people. Philosophers, for example, thinkers, sociologists, religious scholars who are maybe thinking a little bit out of the box, people who can grapple with the challenges of modernity and the big questions we're facing today.
So before coming to this, because I think that you are touching a very critical point here, because this is essential. If we look, you are right. If you look at the situation within the Muslim community, very often the idea is that, Muslims has in the countries of origin they came, you have to be a medical doctor, you have to be a computer scientist, you have to work within sciences, because this is where, this is what is valued there, while today it's quite different. At the same time, there are things that we are seeing, and you put it in the right way. We are not only talking about educated people going out of academia. We are talking about all the people, and we cannot just dismiss some of the, because this is still there, this perception coming from Muslim majority countries that the people who are workers and models, this is the gap between the second, third generation and the first generation, with parents coming and working, and they were so courageous with what they have been doing. It's also something that we have to value, isn't it? That we have also, before talking about the priorities, just to look at jobs and to change the mindset. Would you say that there is something to do this?
Well, I think again there's different ways of looking at this. I can fully understand why any parent would want their child to go into a field of study which has a good potential for job security and a good income, and also is going to be something that's going to earn them respect in society. I mean, this is human nature.
Yes, of course.
And the reality is society does reward certain jobs more than others. I mean, financially, you're going to be in a better position if you're a doctor or an engineer than, say, if you're an artist or a hairstylist, because that's just the way the world works. And so that is understandable.
But I'm talking about the perception, because you are coming from the United States. I am just coming from there, talking to immigrants. The perception, for example, they have about the African American Muslims not having jobs, sometimes facing very difficult situations. It's as if, we are not talking here about only jobs, we are talking about class divides. That is also something that has to do with education and jobs.
Yeah, I do think there is a strong class component involved in this too. So are you saying that we should change our mindset with respect
This is
to
what my question was
value?
about, the mindset about jobs, before coming to the point that you were making, what is lacking. Because I think that we also have to understand that the society, a community, is relying on all these jobs, all these people, and we have to be very cautious not to come with an elitist viewpoint when it comes to jobs.
Yes, I agree. And I do think if someone is going to pursue a career path, especially one that requires a substantial amount of education, that is perhaps not as obviously financially rewarding as, say, medicine, there is some personal sacrifice involved, maybe even family sacrifice. But I think as a community or as a society, this is important for us. I mean, it is, of course, important for us to be financially secure for any community. I mean, you don't want to be a drain on the world. You want to be able to contribute to the world, as you mentioned. And one way to do that is to have simply a solid and lawful income base. And so it is good to have people in professions which are financially viable. And even if we want to look at the Islamic source texts, it's clear that this was it's the way the prophets are portrayed in the Islamic source texts, being self-supporting and not living off of the people. So this is the way we're encouraged to live too. And that being said, I think if we look at it on a societal level, if we have all of our people clumped in one or two fields, or what we have nowadays, which is basically, sort of an elite in basically engineering and medicine for the most part, and then the workers, and not a lot in between, that does leave a big gap. And I think that is the gap that also needs to be filled.
Because in fact, if we look at this situation, exactly in this polarization, when we are dismissing what was done by the first generations of Muslims, we are forgetting our history, because these people were the people that we have to value, and we have to respect this very difficult time when they came. And the second people are just talking about being successful in the future, and sometimes it's just about making money. In between, there are needs, and this is what you said at the beginning, which is very important. You are saying what we need now is much more people studying human sciences and being involved in sociology and philosophy, while you have some scholars saying philosophy is not really Islamic, sociology is to think that things are materialistically driven and not by the will of God. What would you answer to people who are facing their parents? Sometimes they say, that's not a job. That's not a job.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying these subjects should be studied as a form of religious studies or Islamic studies itself. That is its own field, and we have universities and other educational institutions which do offer that. But I do think having people in some of these, we may call them intermediate fields of study, so to speak, is important because, you know, as Muslims, I would say we are ideologically under attack in the present era. And, you know, we can't necessarily always simply repeat the same things we've repeated. We do have to grapple with new ideas. I mean, a very obvious example this century is communism. I don't think there's really something, say, in the 1500s that was written that directly addresses the question of communism and whether it's Islamic or not. But as we know, communist ideology was quite popular in some Muslim countries, maybe 50 or 60 years ago, and maybe even a bit more recent than that.
We also have some thinkers saying we need an Islamic socialism.
Yes, exactly. So these are the sorts of things we need to deal with. And so sometimes having people who are familiar with the developments in modern thought, as well as the traditional Islamic thought, of course, can help formulate new ideas. I mean, this is, of course, only one of many ideas.
So go ahead. What else? What other disciplines you think that you said sociology to understand societies, philosophy to understand this very difficult battle of thoughts and sometimes understanding the big questions. What else would you add?
Well, to be honest, I do think everyone has their own talents and inclinations. I mean, you get a bunch of children together in the classroom. One of them wants to be an astronaut, one of them wants to be an athlete, one of them wants to be an artist. They all have their dreams. And usually, even from a young age, people are somewhat inclined towards the things they're naturally good at. So I do think the best thing is to try to nurture the inborn talent and to try to help the young person direct themselves in a field that they're interested in and they would be able to make a contribution.
But this is a very important point, because you said that the unborn talents and the skills that we find, it's also for the parents to understand. Don't drive them or direct them towards something that you like, but something that they can do with the skills. Because it could be, for example, you said sociology, you said philosophy. We also can add anything which has to do with art. I was asked once about the main disciplines, and I think that history, it's an important discipline. And if you look at the Muslims, the only history they refer to is the seerah and the biography and the first years, but not enough about the Islamic civilization, the Islamic history, with all the difficulties, because we are idealizing the past, and not understanding the past means that we are not facing the present and the future. So these are disciplines that are important.
Yes, I do agree history is an important discipline, although perhaps I have a slightly more optimistic view about the historical work that's been done in the past century by Muslims, but there still is a lot more historical
I'm talking about the ordinary
done.
Muslims and the Muslim that we see in the community. Very often the sense of history is missing, as it is missing in the West, as it is missing, all the students and the children that we have now. When it comes to history, there is a lack of an in-depth understanding.
Definitely. Also, you mentioned the arts. I do think being able to express ourselves is very important, and there are many ways of expression. I think a major gap we have is fiction writing. Of course, in some Muslim cultures, that there's a lot more Muslim fiction just by virtue of the fact it is a majority Muslim culture. Definitely, fiction written by Muslim authors in the West is an area in which there's a lot of room for development.
Anything which has to do with arts, by the way,
the arts in general,
it could be even depending on the positioning of the scholars, but music and painting and arts in general is something which imagination is, or creativity is something that we are not valuing enough.
Film also.
Yeah, exactly. Movies.
I mean, I do think the situation has improved a lot, even in the past 10 or 15 years, with respect to media, in that. And of course, you would know best, of course. But I think if you ask someone, say, 20 years ago, a Muslim, if they should go into media, if they're practicing Muslim, they might have been a bit uncertain about it, just because it would have required dealing with things that might have been religiously problematic. And yet nowadays, there are a lot of young Muslims who go into media, and they also have the opportunity to work with Islamically oriented satellite channels, or also in the mainstream media. So there's a lot more options available, open to them as well nowadays. And I think having people in the Muslim community in the media is also very important.
Mm-hmm. The media. What would you say about the alternative media, for example, when it comes to the social networks and internet? Do you think that we are present enough in these areas?
Do you mean as developers or as people who simply use these products?
No, developers, of course, because we had people talking, Facebook is not us, we need to have an Islamic social network. What is it good to push our students to go in that direction?
I think that's something you'd really have to see. I mean, if it were developed, you could see whether or not it's successful or not. I'm not sure that copying things is really the best direction to go in, whether it's making an Islamic eBay or Islamic email server or whatever. But, the essence of software development, or idea development for that matter, in general, is making new things. So ideally, our youth would be on the forefront of making genuinely new things. I mean, when Facebook was first made, for example, no one expected that it would really take over the world the way it has, or be able to influence political uprisings and so forth. So you don't always know what's going to have an impact. But I do think encouraging young people, and even not so young people, to be innovative in their work is important. And again, I think that's all part of being idea people. I mean, you don't necessarily need to be in the humanities to be an idea person. Again, there are many fields of study and fields of work and so forth. And I mean, this is probably a very old-fashioned piece of advice, but I think the best thing is for people to do whatever they are best at to the best of their ability. Of course, within the confines of religion, obviously. Yeah. Islamically speaking, someone should not be doing something against religious principles, like selling alcohol or promoting alcohol or indecent values and so forth. But assuming whatever they're doing is not ethically problematic, they should just give it their best.
I will come to my last question. Before this, I have another question, which is for me quite important. When it comes to the field of knowledge, we seem to have a problem within the Muslim communities around the world, but especially today in the West, with psychology. So how do you deal with this? You are in the realm of academia, very often have, psychology is a way of dealing with, the minds and the self and the mental world in a way which is not really Islamic. This is what we get as a reaction. What would be your reaction?
Well, actually, I personally haven't encountered that too much. Now, I can believe it's there. I have known people who attempted to synthesize some traditional Islamic teachings with modern psychology. I mean, people who, for example, had a background in Islamic scholarship and also a degree in psychology. And I would say there are some definite areas of crossover. For example, if you look at the theory of Erickson's life stages, you can find a hadith that essentially support that, and also life guidance for various phases of your life that also matches that. So I think there's actually a lot of potential in what you could perhaps refer to as Islamic psychology, and part of that is also simply looking.
But you think we have to develop this?
I think there's still room for development, but I have seen people, admittedly not a lot of people, but some people who have been pushing that boundary. And I do think, just in general, viewing the human being as a holistic being, both in terms of having the brain and the mind and the body, but also the soul, is a very positive way of dealing with the human being, and also treating any issues that may come up, or engaging in preventive care as well. So I think if it's done sensitively and in a way which is, of course, thoughtful of any concerns people might have, then it would be accepted. But I do think also in general there is a lot more available in terms of counseling or psychological services specifically aimed at the Muslim community, which I think is something there is also a lot of need for. But perhaps this is something that's only changed in the past few years.
Which is also social workers and people who are working in this area. My last question we talked about all these disciplines and it's all fine. We know what the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, Allahumma nas'aluka ilman nafi'a, oh God, we are asking you useful knowledge. If now you have to direct, because knowledge and all these disciplines are but means. Now, how can they use this means? What are the two priorities? Okay, I can be a computer scientist, I can be a sociologist, I can be, so in which way, and quite quickly, please, do they have to use this knowledge for the society? What would be your advice with these specific knowledges?
Well, the question of what knowledge is beneficial is unfortunately a bit of a large question.
But within the society and for the society.
Yeah, well, there are two aspects. From an Islamic perspective, there is a theological aspect in that whatever knowledge leads you to God or greater understanding of Him through His creation and so forth, is in of itself beneficial, religiously desirable. So someone might, for example, study the sciences as a means of understanding the Creator better, and this was quite common among the classical Islamic scientists, even though the benefit is not immediately obvious to society, but we know long term it does. Of course, anything that is of service to people is beneficial, and of course, I think it's for the person studying to be able to sort that out.
Thank you so much. I think that we covered a lot with lots of disciplines, and what you were saying first, I think it's quite important, is first we need to look at our history and to understand that there is no bad and secondary class job. It's something that we have to value because it helps us to understand our history in the West, for example, and in the world. The second point that you are making is opening up new disciplines when it comes to human sciences, when it comes to philosophy, sociology, psychology that we talked about. These are, and journalism and media, this is something which is important. So to discover and to open new horizons is something which is important. And the last point that you were making, which is important, useful knowledge, close to God, but serving also the society. I think it's important when it comes to our way of understanding efficiency, it's also to be efficient with people. Well, that's all we have time for. Please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the shows we have seen. And here is the way to contact us.
We at Islam in Life would like to hear your views about the subjects that we discuss. We would also love to hear your suggestions for our program, so get in touch with us. You can share your thoughts with other Islam in Life fans, engage in debate, and find out how to watch our previous shows. Follow us on Twitter at Islam and Life TV, or join us on Facebook by liking our page, Islam and Life on Trust TV.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Amina Inloz. Thank you so much for your presence and your input, and I hope to see you next week, inshallah.